Have you ever purchased a homemade soap from a small business? How about a homemade pastry from a trusted local bakery? If you answered yes to either of those questions, now picture this. What if later you found out that those soaps or those pastries had actually been handcrafted from human remains? That would be horrifying, right? Well, thanks to a seemingly sweet old woman in Italy in the mid-1900s, this became an unfortunate reality for some of her very unsuspecting customers, neighbors, and close friends. She's known as the soap maker of Correggio and is considered to be Italy's first female serial killer, so boy did they start off with a bang. This is the Leonarda Cianciulli story. Hey guys, welcome back. We hit 200 subscribers! Those confetti poppers came as a 4-pack, so you can expect 2 more of them in the future. But seriously, thank you guys so much for 200 subscribers. I say it every time I hit a milestone, but I'll say it again. Obviously, I'm no, hugely, monstrously famous YouTuber, but I don't care. Making these videos has become a part of my life that I enjoy so much. And the fact that 200 people out there enjoy them enough to want to come back every week is freaking awesome. So thank you. I appreciate every single person out there so much. And I can't wait to see how our community continues to grow as we move forward. And while I'm over here just gushing with gratitude, I'd also like to shout out a fellow creator who recently featured me in one of their videos, which, what? Thank you so much to Truth for Reality for including me in your most recent documentary. If you guys haven't already, you should totally check out their channel. The editing and narration is just... and they cover super interesting stories. I'll make sure to have their video linked in the description box down below so you can head over and check them out. And with all that, literally skip my entire intro. Professional. If you're new here, hi, my name is Jessica and welcome to my channel where I explore new true crime cases each week. If you have an interest in true crime like me and you'd like to join me back here each week, go ahead and subscribe to my channel down below. And with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into today's case. Leonarda Cianciulli was born on April 18th, 1893 in Italy in Montella Avellino. Ooh, I bet my great-grandma is rolling in her grave at that pronunciation. Sorry, girl. She was born in Italy to her parents, Leonarda, not my great-grandma. Oh my god, Leonarda Cianciulli. Born in Italy to her parents, Mariano Cianciulli and Emilia Dinolfi. But this was not first comes love, then comes marriage, blah blah blah. No. Leonarda was actually the product of rape. Emilia was actually sexually assaulted by Mariano on her way home from a party one night. Emilia was incredibly beautiful and well off. Her family was very well respected, which meant that she had suitors just lining up for a chance to be her husband. And Mariano resented her for this. He knew that she was too beautiful and rich to have any interest in a lazy old drunk like himself. So when he saw her walking home alone that night, he decided to seize the opportunity to knock her down a few pegs. At first, Emilia thought she was being robbed, but before she could really even process what was happening, Mariano was done and gone, and Emilia was left laying alone on the ground. This experience left Emilia feeling extremely ashamed of herself. She felt that her virtue was gone and that no man would want her now because she was damaged. Researching this made me so sad because I know that she's not the only woman who's ever experienced these feelings. And it's just so far from the truth. The only person whose worth and character was tarnished by this event was Mariano's. He's a piece of shit. Emilia was a victim, and she really punished herself by painting this image of herself in her mind, while also bearing the burden of what had happened alone. Because she felt so horrible about herself following the assault, she didn't tell anyone what had happened. She basically just tried to repress the memory and move on with her life, until a few weeks later, when she turned up pregnant. And, get ready for your ass to feel a little chapped, because in order to not bring shame to her family, Emilia's pregnancy now meant that she was expected to marry this man. Yes, the very same man who'd forced himself on her. Oh yeah, we're 4 minutes in and it's already pretty fucked up, so buckle in because it does not get better. It's likely not necessary to clarify this, but Emilia was miserable with this arrangement. She was not only traumatized from having survived the sexual assault, but she was now expected to marry this man. Disgusting. She was forced to marry him, to live with him, and to carry and birth his child. She asked for none of these things and was now forced to deal with all of them. And at such a young age, but she's a woman, so who cares? Women wanting to be treated like humans. So, that's how Leonarda came into the world, and sadly this all culminated to a very loveless childhood for her. Her mother obviously felt some type of way about her and her father, and the whole situation was just a toxic-ass mess. Mariano did pass away pretty early on in Leonarda's life, but all this did was leave she and her mother impoverished and struggling to get by. Amelia did eventually remarry, but the family remained poor throughout all of Leonarda's childhood. And her father's passing did nothing to mend her relationship with her mother either. Amelia was emotionally abusive and just downright hateful towards Leonarda. She never let her forget that she was unwanted. And on top of that, she had other children with her new husband, and to them, she was incredibly loving and maternal, which eventually tanked Leonarda's self-esteem and just mental health in general. She eventually attempted to take her life on 2 separate occasions. But her suicide attempts were both unsuccessful, so she started desperately trying to find herself some source of happiness, and eventually she did find something. Leonarda was very superstitious, which eventually led her to find interest and joy in fortune-telling, astrology, and palm reading. And this hobby really helped her to get through the remainder of her awful childhood. As a young adult, Leonarda's mother and stepfather hand-selected a wealthy gentleman for her to marry. This was not only in their minds good for Leonarda, but it would be great for them as well. With Leonarda marrying into wealth, their financial struggles would be over as well. But Leonarda was kind of like, yeah, fuck that. You're gonna treat me like crap all these years and then tell me who to marry to benefit you. Nah, I'm gonna find my own husband, but thanks. I mean, that likely wasn't her exact verbiage, but you get it. So Leonarda went out, fell in love with, and married her own man, Mr. Raphael Pansardi, in 1917. As you can imagine, this had not gone over well with Mommy Dearest. Not only was Raphael just a lowly office clerk, but he was also considerably older than Leonarda. Amelia was actually so outspoken of her disdain for Raphael that Leonarda actually believed that her mother had put a curse on her marriage. I told you she was superstitious. Can't relate. I'm not superstitious, but I'm a little stitious. While it probably sounds ridiculous that Leonarda thought her marriage was cursed, she kind of had reasons to back up that fear. Not only did she start having recurring nightmares about her mother, but she and Raphael definitely experienced more than their fair share of bad luck over the years. It started out with their finances. Raphael was just not making enough money to support them. So Leonarda worked as well in order to try to make ends meet, but even with that, they were barely scraping by. Then in 1927, when she was 30 years old, Leonarda was arrested and thrown in prison for fraud. She served her time, and when she was released, she and Raphael packed up and moved to Lacedonia for a fresh start, trying to leave that rap sheet behind. But, mind you, they're cursed, so naturally in 1930, their house was demolished by an earthquake which forced them to pack up and move yet again. This time they settled in Correggio, which was the first place that she and Raphael ever experienced any type of financial stability. Leonarda opened a small but very successful soap shop, and pretty quickly the couple became well-known, well-liked, and well-respected members of their community. Throughout these years, Leonarda had been pregnant 17 times, 3 of which ended in miscarriages, and 10 of which had been born alive but had passed away in early childhood. Because of this, she understandably was very overprotective of her 4 remaining children. She was terrified of losing them, a fear which was exacerbated by the fact that years earlier, like before she'd ever even gotten married, a fortune teller had warned her that although she would have a lot of children, she would outlive all of them. And this was devastating to Leonarda, as it likely would be to anyone. She truly believed in this stuff, so when her children really did start passing away, she obsessed over trying to find ways to change what she had been told was destined to be. Had she been born about a century later, she could have watched Final Destination and learned that you just simply cannot evade your fate for long. But instead, she decided that her best course of action was to consult a palm reader. Maybe they could give her some pointers on how to defy the odds. However, this meeting was just rife with new reasons for Leonarda to worry. The palm reader explained that not only did Leonarda's right hand suggest that she would spend time in prison, which we already discussed she had in 1927, so no big shock there, but her left hand, now that was the doozy. The palm reader explained that her left hand suggested that she would end up in an insane asylum. Yikes. But the palm reader didn't have anything negative to say about Leonarda's children, so She was fine with the reading. In late 1939, at the start of World War II, Prime Minister Benito Mussolini made the decision to enter the war in support of Germany. Yikes again. And with this decision, so began the recruiting of just fleets of young men to make up the Italian army. And unfortunately for Leonarda, among these young men was Giuseppe Pansardi, her eldest son. When she found out that her son was going to war, she was frantic.
You guys can't have that one, he's my favorite.
Over her dead body, was she going to let anything happen to her precious boy? At which point she realized that maybe her dead body wasn't necessarily the answer. Instead, she decided that maybe she could possibly save her son's life by generously sacrificing someone else's. She saw absolutely no issues with this idea in her mind, and she kind of already had the perfect way to secure a victim. You see, by this point in her life, Leonarda herself had become a well-respected fortune teller. She was so highly respected and loved in regards to her craft because she basically just told everyone what they wanted to hear. She claimed that she could make people's dreams come true, and they believed her. Her business was thriving. She constantly had people in and out to have their fortunes told and their dreams made to come true. So with this, she decided she would select one of her loyal patrons to act as the human sacrifice she needed to save her son. And before long, she set her sights on a 73-year-old woman named Faustina Setti. Faustina was a poor, lonely old woman who was desperate for a husband. She frequented the shop hoping that Leonarda would someday be able to help her find her dream man. And sooner rather than later because, the woman was 73 in the early 1900s, so she was kind of living on borrowed time as it was. So the next time Faustina came into the shop, Leonarda told her that she could see her husband and that he was located in Pola, or what we know today as Croatia. She went on to explain that Faustina would have to make the journey to Pola in order to find him, and that in doing so, she would need to totally cut ties with her remaining friends and family. Faustina was told to keep the whole thing a secret, and that if she prepared postcards explaining the situation, that Leonarda would see to it that her friends and family received them following her departure. And because this poor woman trusted everything Leonarda said, she did exactly as she was told. She truly believed that this woman had found her husband and that her dreams of getting married were soon to come true. On the day that Faustina believed she was setting off to meet the love of her life, she stopped by the shop to drop off the letters and cards and, of course, to thank Leonarda one last time. But this is when Leonarda set her plan into motion. She drugged Faustina's wine, and when she was totally incapacitated, she murdered her with an axe, dismembered her body into 9 pieces, and collected her blood in a large bowl. She then took the body parts and placed them in a pot with sodium hydroxide, which she used in her soap making, and cooked the mixture until it turned into like a thick, dark mush. She then poured said mush into buckets and disposed of it in a nearby, septic tank sort of situation. Huh? Nauseous yet? Too bad. We ain't done. She then let the blood she'd collected coagulate before drying it in an oven and grinding it into a powder. A powder she then mixed with flour, sugar, chocolate, milk, eggs, and butter to make into cakes. She gave some of these cakes to people who visited her shop, and the rest were eaten by herself and Giuseppe. At the risk of repeating myself, she was also able to get her hands on Faustina's life savings, which was about 30,000 lire, which I believe would be just shy of $5,000 in today's money. Lire is obsolete today, so finding conversion rates for that was really difficult. So if by chance you're an expert on old-timey currency and my numbers are way off, please feel free to correct me in the comments down below. But don't be a dick about it. With Leonarda's newfound wealth, she was spending money faster than she'd ever spent money before. And eventually, she needed more. She seemed to have so easily gotten away with what she'd done to Faustina, so, why not do it again? Her surrounding neighbors would later claim that they did notice a terrible smell coming from her kitchen, likely when she was cooking down the body parts, but because it never lasted long, it was just ignored. Unfortunately, this oversight would prove fatal for Francesca Soavi. Francesca was a 55-year-old woman who sought out Leonarda's services in hopes of finding a new job. Lucky for her, Leonarda had found her a fantastic job at a girls' school in northern Italy. And to secure this job, Leonarda had Francesca follow the exact same steps that she'd had Faustina follow. She was to cut ties with her family and friends, sell off her belongings, and write letters to her family letting them know that Sis had moved on, that they would no longer be seeing her around town, so don't bother looking. She told her that when she had completed these tasks to come back to drop off the letters and that Leonarda would see her off. And on September 5th, 1940, believing that a bright future lay ahead, Francesca returned to Leonarda. Once she was in the shop, Leonarda drugged her with tainted wine, bludgeoned her with the axe, dismembered her body, and cooked her into cakes, just as she had with Faustina. She managed to collect money from Francesca prior to her death as well, but this time she was only able to obtain about 3,000 lire or $480. The only other difference between Faustina and Francesca was that poor Franny was just a little bit fattier, with which Leonarda took some creative liberties. She harvested Francesca's fat and used it to make soap and candles. Dare I say, She sold these soaps and candles and cakes to her friends and customers, never once stopping to think that, hey, maybe this is fucking deranged and I should keep my human remain concoctions to my damn self. Seriously, I'm never buying anything from anyone ever again. While Leonarda had pretty easily skirted by without getting caught for the first two murders, it would be her third victim that would shut her nasty little operation down once and for all. Opera singer Virginia Cacciapo was not only a good friend of Leonarda's, but she would also be her final kill. On one fateful September day, Virginia decided to visit her dear friend, Leonarda. And it was perfect timing because Leonarda had just gotten word of a super exciting job opportunity for Virginia. She could go to Florence and work as a secretary for an impresario. Now, if you're uncultured like me and don't know what that is without looking it up, it's a person who manages and finances concerts, operas, and plays. So obviously, as an opera singer, this opportunity sounded perfect for Virginia. She was so excited. Too excited. Although Leonarda had given her the exact same instructions that she'd given her first two victims, most importantly, to keep her destiny a secret, Virginia could not keep her mouth shut. She told several close friends and family members about her incredible opportunity, an opportunity afforded to her by none other than Leonarda Cianciulli. Sadly, when she returned on September 30th, 1940, instead of seeing Virginia off to greener pastures, Leonarda carried out her sadistic ritual one last time. When speaking of Virginia's murder, Leonarda later said, quote, "She ended up in the pot like the other two. Her flesh was fat and white. When it had melted, I added a bottle of cologne, and after a long time on the boil, I was able to make some most creamy soap. I gave bars to neighbors and acquaintances. The cakes, too, were better. That woman was really sweet." Yikes. In regards to securing a profit from these heinous acts, Leonarda went much further with Virginia's death than she had her first two victims. She raided Virginia's house and walked away with about 50,000 lire or $8,000 today. She also made off with Virginia's clothing, shoes, and jewelry, which she took upon herself to sell to her neighbors. She thought she was sitting pretty. She'd successfully murdered another victim. She'd made off with more money from this victim than ever before. And she'd made the most delicious cakes and creamiest soaps from her flesh. It was a win-win-win situation until it wasn't. You see, a relative of Virginia's was very suspicious of her disappearance. I've seen this relative listed as a sister as well as a sister-in-law, so we're just gonna go with relative. And this relative eventually took her concerns to the police. She filed a missing persons report and explained that Virginia had not been seen since the last time she went to Leonarda's shop. When police confronted Leonarda with this information and these suspicions, she vehemently denied any involvement in Virginia's disappearance. That is, until police set their sights on Giuseppe. Remember Giuseppe, Leonarda's son? Her pride and joy that she'd set off to protect by whacking people in the first place? Yeah, him. Suspicion being cast onto him was all it took for Leonarda to voluntarily just lie down underneath the bus. She told them everything. She basically talked from the minute she was arrested to the start of her trial, which, due to the war, didn't begin until 1946. But the delay certainly didn't quell public interest in Leonarda. People were so horrified and intrigued by her case that they waited hours to get a seat in the courtroom to watch the proceedings. Seriously, when the gates to the courthouse opened, there was almost like an early 2000s Walmart Black Friday stampede situation. Everyone wanted a front row seat to hear exactly what Leonarda was responsible for. And she did not disappoint. She was an open book about it. In fact, while she was in prison, she actually wrote a book about it. It was called An Embittered Soul's Confessions, and it detailed the best practices for not only breaking down a human body, but also for turning them into soap. Yikes. But despite Leonarda's confession, the police were still kind of suspicious of Giuseppe. Frankly, they did not believe that a woman could butcher a human body so quickly and efficiently all by herself. So to prove that her story was true, Leonarda accompanied the police to the morgue, where right in front of them, she proceeded to dissect a corpse into 9 pieces in under 12 minutes, all by herself. Yeah, Giuseppe was acquitted, and Leonarda was found guilty for all 3 murders. She was sentenced to 3 years in a criminal asylum, followed by 30 years in prison, just as the palm reader had predicted. Leonarda remained incarcerated until the ripe old age of 76, when she suffered a stroke and passed away on October 15, 1970. Understandably, people have always found this story just fascinating, which is why it has been adapted into numerous movies and plays, and the actual real-life tools that she used to dismember and cook down these women's bodies are on display at the Criminological Museum in Rome. So if you're planning a trip to Rome, pencil that into your itinerary because it sounds worth it. Anyways, that about sums up this wholesome story. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and as always, I thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video and to listen to this story. If you haven't already and you'd like to, go ahead and subscribe to my channel down below. I put out new true crime content each week, and I would love to see you back here in my next video. Until then, stay safe and have a good week. Bye, guys.